I wanted to have a conversation here about having strong men in your life. So I have a comment here where a woman is talking about, hey, I have a history of narcissistic relationships, abusive relationships with men. I am uncomfortable forming relationships with men. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. This woman says, or at least I assume this is a woman, I do not have strong men in my life. After being in a narcissistic relationship, I have an extremely hard time trusting any man. I'm uncomfortable around men. I understand where you're coming from with this, and it sounds like you're not alone. There's a lot of women who also liked your comment. And one of the things that I would recommend is, start slow. Um, and, therapy could help with that, but also talking to people about that could certainly help. Not every man is narcissistic. Not every man is abusive, and if you're when you allow yourself to, you can actually have a corrective emotional experience with men, because there are a lot of great men out there, but you have to be open to it. But start slow. Starting slow could be like, saying hello, how are you, to men at work, engaging in simple little conversations about the weather. And then you could certainly ask for help. And one of the things, and I've talked about it, here on my post, I've talked a lot about how men love to mansplain to me, Dr. Jones, you don't know what you're talking about, and this and that and the other, and blah, 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 blah. And I think, that could be both a negative, but it could also be very much a positive, because men like to explain so much. Really, if you just get them talking, they will just talk, 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 which is fantastic. And I don't mind when men even mansplain to me at all, really, because depending on how it's done, as long as it's done respectfully. Uh, but you can get them talking, asking for help, something small on the job. Hey, how did you do this? Or what is your advice about this? You could start, with a simple phone call or an email, in a communication that feels safe to you. But I always encourage women to start with mentorship, or start with, like, a question about a problem, like a general question, nothing that's too invasive or nothing that's too personal in terms of oversharing, and ask for advice. And a lot of times men will, offer, solutions and things like that. And you can go to someone that um, I would say that at least you respect, at least from a distance. Maybe they're respectful, they show up well at work, so I would start there. But, it may help if you have family members too, if you've got uncles, and things like that. My uncles are great. I always have a conversation with them about something, we could always, if nothing else, we could always have a good laugh, like, for example, I got an uncle, every time I go home, he just sort of pops up. He just pops up, like pops out of nowhere, and he's like, Natalie, and he always sort of pops up with like some scenario with some woman. He's always leading with that. This woman, she did this to me, and blah, and we just have a good laugh about it. And I'm like, well, what'd you do? You like certain types of women, and we could just sort of have a good laugh about it. And it's just like a good time, and we just go on and on about it. And we don't really talk to each other all the time, but sometimes we talk. And I talked to all my uncles when my grandmother passed. Wished them well, and showed up for them and things like that, because I know that they were very heartbroken. And so it's sort of that, where we can have a laugh, but we can also have serious conversation. So it could be family members too, but it could also be just something that's strictly platonic, and you could set the pace at it. But you also, maybe work through some of that with a professional therapist, where, um, you know, you're making sure that you're not making generalizations to every single man out there, or you're not, seeing things in just black and white, like men only hurt you or they do this. And sometimes that can happen, right? um Even to the best person, where you can get like a bit, you know snappy or whatever, or you go back to a place that is familiar when someone says something. But you want to make sure and work that through and continue working that through, until you've allowed yourself to have corrective emotional experiences. You've worked through your biases, your stereotypes, and generalizations, where you could see, positives and negatives, but you also don't take things personally. You don't always think that everyone's out to get you or hurt you or do you harm. You don't want to be stuck in a perpetual state of victimhood, with men or women. You just don't want to do it. It's not a good place to be. And there's, your world gets so small when you do that. You can't move forwards or backwards. So just try not to allow yourself to do that. I hope that helps. Thanks so much for putting that out. One other thing that I will also mention, is, before I forget, is making sure that you monitor content, around this or that, in terms of how bad it can be, how bad all men are, and this and that and the other. So if you engage in a lot of that kind of stuff, you want to try to monitor that, and look for positive examples of, male role models and things like that as well. So always try to supplement, good if you see things bad. Even if you watch my stuff, always make sure you look for positive examples based on, the goals that you have in your life, where you want to go, and the types of relationships you want to have with people. Hope that helps.